Yo, this is The Rock kicking it with the refugee camp, and you're about to smell what The Rock is cooking, of course. Yo, this is strictly a club record. Mike, you're not allowed to listen to it right now. You have to turn it off. It says it's strictly a club record. You're not in a club? Dedicated to everybody who used to stand outside in the cold when Flex was spinning at the red zone, hooded down. Okay. Wait, so it's a Wyclef Jean song and not a
Jean,
rock?
I believe.
That makes sense.
It's a sample of The Rock, I think.
Oh, it's about The Rock?
I cannot remember any of the cultural context around this song.
Such a shame Austin is effectively not present. I'm sure he would know as the musician of the show.
I think as the musician, he would know there was originally a Jerry Goldsmith track. By the way, I'm experiencing the greatest thing in America, which is Shake Shack milkshakes. This is my first Shake Shack milkshake. It's glorious.
It's so good. Big fan of Shake Shack. Anybody, hey everyone. We're recording at 8 p.m. Which never happens. Hi, Austin. Is your audio okay?
Not for you guys.
Hello, I am still getting my shit together here. So
is something wrong?
What? No. I was literally working right up until I answered the call, and then I kept working. So the call was open, and I was revising some music so I can send some changes on a thing tonight. And then I was like, oh man, I got to open Pro Tools and like set up my microphone. And
gotcha.
So you get to enjoy the process of that while apparently BTS. We've already started recording.
It's okay. We were talking about a song that The Rock is in by Wyclef Jean.
Wyclef Jean?
I don't know.
Wyclef Jean. I don't
know. Called It Doesn't Matter. What would you like to tell us about this song as the musician,
I know
Austin?
Absolutely nothing.
Don't believe you.
I like the
it doesn't.
It is nothing short of an honor that the presumption is anything remotely affiliated with music. I'm just.
Hey, Austin, you are music, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Help us out here. Yeah, hello
worse
everyone.
Fate than being told I am music.
I'm going to intro the show at the start just because it makes sense to. Is that okay? Hi everyone, welcome to Play, Watch, Listen. I'm Alanah, I'm a video game writer. That's Mike Bifley's a video game director. That's also Wizarding, a video game composer. Troy is not here. Sadly, he's too busy for us. It happens.
Jerk.
But Mike, you done announced a new video game recently.
I did. I think technically the Walt Disney Company announced a new video game.
That's true.
But I was very proud to be there.
Yes. How does that feel? You were the opening of the whole conference.
I know, right? It's wild, and there was some cool stuff in there.
For sure.
No, it was very cool, very cool. It was. It's just weird because I was saying this to someone earlier. I have literally obsessively been worrying about leaking this game for so long that saying the word Tron on a recorded podcast,
feels
like
wrong.
you guys knew like what I was doing and stuff. So like, I knew you had my back to like double check, but I've actually like painstakingly listened back to my part of so many episodes of this podcast. So like, did I say the word Tron at some point?
No.
Were we talking about Disney? And I mentioned
Did my
Tron?
eyebrow twitch when light bikes got mentioned?
The closest we got, and I don't know which episode this is in, I encourage people to go back and rewatch episones and comment and like and subscribe on them. But like
leave a review, 5 stars.
There was specifically there's one moment in one of them I remember where Austin mentions Tron Legacy and like does like a little like, Mike, like look at me on the camera and you can spot it and no one picked up on it.
You know the worst one I had? I don't know if I've brought this up since. I probably have. We repeat things. There was an episode where you were all talking about God of War Ragnarok and you said that it was like a DLC or a shorter thing.
Yeah.
You were like, I think it's a shorter. No, that's been announced. And I was just like, because it's not like I could say no at that point in time either. I was just
I think we stopped recording and you told me off for that. I said, no, that's not what it is.
I may have, yeah.
So,
it was very weird to have to sit there and be like, yeah, but for anyone who missed it, what's the game? What is it? What's going on?
So we're doing, we've announced the first game we're doing with Disney, which is Tron Identity.
Very cool.
So it's very exciting, which is, it's a, if people have played like Subsurface Circular, Quarantine Circular from us, or Solitaire Conspiracy, it's in that kind of scale, but then just like taken to a ridiculous level of production value because Disney, and that's been really cool. And just doing Tron and going back to Tron and just kind of nerding out over all of that.
It must
has
be
been
very
amazing.
Cool.
It's been like it's been amazing. Yeah, it's very like as a fan of those movies, like massively since I was a kid. It's genuinely phenomenal. And also just as a big I'm a big Disney adult as well. So like going to D23 and announcing stuff and having their big. There's this talk that happens at D23 where they announce all the new rides that they're working on, all this stuff, and to have that talk and it's delivered by the chairman of Disney for parks and whatever. And to hear him actually plugging the game on stage, like you can come to the theme park and experience Tron, or at home you can play Tron Identity. Just like my little nerdy brain kind of freaked out.
Was that a thing that you like listened to previous years anyway?
Oh yeah, no, that's like it's
that
like
it's
cool.
Like
it's it's like it's like when you get your first game into like an E3 or whatever. Yeah, it's a big deal.
How much of I only saw that you had announced it, and you've likened it, obviously, like even like you just said a second ago, you've likened it to Subsurface Circular. Is there any more that you've revealed beyond that? I'm particularly asking when you say higher production value, I'm curious what that targets, because a strength of Subsurface was that it's a game that it thrives on its limited means. Like it was not a game that, if you had said, imagine this but bigger budget, I would say that's like a bigger budget novel. What does that even mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah. In this case,
so can you even answer this question? Is it?
Yeah, and I appreciate that like both of you know things and you're trying to work out what we're allowed to talk about. I appreciate the diligence you're both doing. I really do appreciate it. No, it's bigger budget in the sense that it's got bigger art. It takes Subsurface Circular obviously takes place entirely in like one train carriage. This is more like several different environments within a space. Lots of characters, all of them different, not just robots with color swaps, and then just going into music and audio and just pushing everything, because that's the thing with Tron. Like, and we had this conversation super early on. It's like, if you're going to do Tron, you have to like be hitting such a visual and audio level just to basically match where the IP is. Like if you Tron Legacy is just like, it's incredible visually, musically. It's just, yeah.
The original still looks quite unique to all other movies.
Oh yeah.
Like even relative to Legacy, like the original
and
film
the soundtrack
just
as well.
simply
like,
looks like its own movie.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it in a really long time.
Definitely
like
really
it still holds up.
Well, I was chatting with Bruce Boxleitner, the guy who played Tron, the other day.
Yeah, take a sip.
We talked about this a little bit. Yeah.
There's nothing like a flexing Shake Shack sip.
Right.
So good, though.
Right. I'm
what
discovering a whole
get?
new form of communication. It's a vanilla malt. So classic, simple. Don't you want to? It's like when you go to a Thai restaurant, you want to try the pad Thai first just to work out the baseline.
That's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's cool, and yeah. So that's where what I mean when I say big budget. Also, it's also like bigger in the sense of we're not talking about like duration stuff, but there's definitely like a lot of story there. So that's cool.
Well, an obvious thing would be
get those wish lists. Gotta get those wish lists to cover the cost.
The two most obvious places to expand, but they may also kind of violate a core conceit of it, would be if it was all voiced, and also, like, I guess this wouldn't really violate the core conceit, but if you had just way more branching content where you don't really, it's not obvious, you just have to replay it to find it. You know what I mean? Like that's always a way to spend money in a hurry.
We're definitely doing the latter. So like voice, and you've been through all of it. You've been through a lot of this with your project, right? With the musical, like the voice is a nightmare for a game like this, just because you'd have to do so many variants of everything. So we're not doing
100% the same vote as us.
But the choice thing is a big area where we definitely have pushed. Like with, I don't know if both of you have played Subsurface and Quarantine, but like Subsurface basically has one very important choice right at the end, which basically impacts the last 2 minutes, and that's basically the only choice in there. Quarantine's a bit more granular, but not very not very readable in the moment. Whereas, yeah, Identity, like, you can vary things up wildly. There's you can basically, the game can be a bloodbath where everyone gets derezzed, or it can be a peaceful kind of playthrough of an investigation. Yeah,
you hired up for this too, right? How big's the team now?
We're growing, so the Identity team is
500.
Yeah, 500 people. No, Identity is quite small. It's like, but we're also staffing up the company for completely unrelated reasons.
Exciting stuff.
It's funny. I remember playing Circular and feeling like it was. I thought, I'm pretty sure this is pretty linear, generally speaking. Like in terms of the overall flow of the narrative. Yeah. I wasn't certain because I played it just the once. Quarantine. I then thought that's probably. I played it then, so I played it in its entirety, and I remember thinking, it feels like it probably is similarly so. And then I later watched someone's analysis on YouTube of it, and I realized it was much more branching than I had realized.
This is such an interesting thing about branching in general, is that most players don't even see it. So, like,
if
it's done subtly, David Gator from Dragon Age, who is the creative director on this musical that we're doing, he has a great phrase that he uses for this kind of thing where you give player choice that they don't know there is a choice. He calls it card tricks in the dark. And he's basically like, it's essentially useless. Like, the players should
if they don't
be
know,
aware
it
they're
doesn't
making
mean
a
anything
choice.
To them.
Yeah, but I find it an interesting
something in your system. Yeah.
It's an interesting conundrum because to me, there's something really intriguing about imagine a subsurface type game where if I have two questions I can ask you, and I'm like, hey, what's the weather outside? Or what'd you have for lunch? And like your answer, maybe I can even ask the one I didn't ask as a follow-up, but your answer will be different because it's one coming from the other, and it proceeds like any conversation would. And then those end up being like the little pebbles in the stream that cause these ripples where that order, as seemingly innocuous as it is, yields two totally different games that, one ends in a bloodbath and the other ends I mean, it's kind of the premise of the musical If Then, where it's like you see someone in a park, you see two different people that both call over to you, and then in a sliding doors kind of way, whichever one you say to first divides your life into wildly different timelines. Yeah. There's something about that, a game capturing that, even if you don't recognize that's what you're doing. But if you don't
recognize it is the card. It's the card.
No,
which is the
I don't
problem.
think so. I think if players don't know there's a choice, then the choice doesn't mean anything to them. So I think that like the illusion of choice is more important in a lot of cases, and it's like that's sort of more difficult on the internet now too, because some of the Mass Effect stuff might not have mattered if it weren't for the internet. The Mass Effect 3 stuff, like if people felt like they had a choice because the game told them they did, the 3 explosions wouldn't have meant anything if everyone didn't know day and date that it was just 3 different colored explosions.
Yeah,
but there's also something to be said for that. Like look at a game like Undertale where
I haven't played it.
99% of the I fully admit I never finished the game. But I've spent a lot of time watching people's kind of analysis of it because it's fascinating to me how Toby Fox created this like infinite labyrinth of content for people to find, and it's one of those things where people keep finding things in the game, like little and that became the game. It's like a meta game around the game that people are finding. I'm sure I'm saying this wrong because I'm not an expert on it, but there's like text files that install in the root directory of the game that are not accessible in game that contain information that leads you to this, leads you to that. Wow. It's one of those where it's just so wild. It's like Inscription where there's so much to it beyond the obvious, and it just keeps going and going, and people keep thinking they've found it all. And it's just one of those where the culture around it is quite amazing to me.
Well, those games both grew out of that culture, though. That's why, like, oh god, what's the fandom that Toby Fox was a big part of? The emo characters with like grey skin.
Emo characters with grey skin.
Like
I can picture
it. It's like a webcomic comic. Oh my goodness!
I didn't even know about that.
I know what you're talking about, and it's and some of them have horns.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes, some of
fuck,
our
it's
horns,
called-
like they're devil's children. This is so embarrassing. The comments section.
But the
is
thing
lighting up.
about Undertale is the reason that I didn't play it was actually because of the fandom. It's one of those few things where I was less interested in that game because at the time where it was very popular, that fandom was very aggressive about it being popular, and I found it off-putting.
It's
I think the reason why is
just
because
just to save the comment section, it's Homestuck we're thinking.
Homestuck, it is. Yes, damn it. Thank you.
I feel like that
welcome.
fandom, that ravenous excitement and aggressive engagement with it is, I think, because of the fact that it had that little in-group, like, we're the ones who know about all the cool peripheral secret stuff. And that I bring it up only as an example of a thing that the game doesn't tell you is there can also be the thing that makes it special, even though arguably that is bad design.
Game. It's a harder game to do that though, like to get players, and you have to hit a critical mass for sure. I'm
Undertale is a one-off too. I mean, it's not like you can't even treat it as like Yeah, sorry. I was just all I was saying is,
I'm running like 5 seconds behind everyone else.
It happens.
Carry on.
It's done to. It's like when a live broadcast wants to the ability to yank someone off the air if they go off the rails.
I think it's Disney. I think Disney's intercepting my video feed because I said something I shouldn't say.
Exactly.
I agree. I tend to agree with Alanah that like the visibility is the thing. I think that was a mistake we made with Quarantine Circular. Like I think there's too many choices you can make in Quarantine Circular where you don't quite see what's going on, and I think that's something we've kind of done better in Identity. And it is that thing of hopefully. It's always this balancing act because on the one hand you want the story to feel like an inevitability because that's stories should only feel like they could have gone one way to some extent, but you also do want to show the paths not taken. It was great when we were playtesting with Identity. We playtested it, and we got when it was just the story component, and we got players who literally were like arguing about like, no, that character dies very quickly in the game. No, that character does this thing and this thing, and it's like that's the thing that's really cool is where you see that the people are arguing about what the canonical version of the story is because they had their versions, someone else had something else. So that's cool. That's the stuff. That's the stuff. And I don't think people would have similar conversations about either of the other circular kind of games. So I think that's something I'm proud of with this one. We'll see if it does that at scale, if people have that reaction. But
do you have a release date?
Bodes well.
I don't remember.
I have a release date, but the public has 2023.
We do not have a release date. Got it. Okay. Hey,
we
that
don't
counts.
have a release date. Yeah, that counts. But yeah, no, it's cool. It's good. We've done that. We're asking everyone to wishlist it. So wishlist.
I'll leave a link for you. Yep.
Official
sponsor of the show. The response seemed very, very excited. That must have been cool because I feel like with this one, I guess it would have happened with John Wick, but it feels like more with this game than any of the other Bithell games. You have a bunch of people who've probably never heard of Bithell games suddenly be really excited about something. Like it's a whole new and very large audience because it's Disney, and I feel like that must be awesome to experience.
It's been cool. There's definitely there's a really really eager Tron audience who've wanted more Tron for a little while.
Did you watch it's all your counterparts? It's basically it's just the use
people
on the consumer side.
The me's of this world, 100%.
Did you watch reactions and stuff?
I watched a few. There's some really other. It's the first time we've had I was watching one earlier. I think I tweeted it. The like a 20-minute deep dive on everything that's hidden in our screenshots.
Wow.
Some of which is correct, some of which isn't. But I'm not going to say which bits are which. But that stuff's cool. Like that's really cool to have that audience kind of glob onto it. What's interesting as well is quite creepily, I guess, kind of seeing some of the conversations in that community where you'll have 10 people who are Tron fans, and they'll be talking about what they've seen of the game, and then you'll have the one Bithell fan in that group who's like, no, guys, there's this and this and that. There's just a really interesting kind of intermingling of those audiences.
Ben Andek,
and it's something
under a different screen name.
Ben, my producer, he's 100% posting 50% of the stuff out there. Yeah, that's it. But no, it's been cool. It's been cool, and I gotta give Disney credit. They've been really cool with all this stuff. We've gone for a game that's a smaller indie thing. It's kind of wild that you can do that with a big IP with Disney. That shouldn't be possible. That's weird.
Very cool.
So I think that's cool. They announced Delilah, which is headed up by AJ, who I used to sit next to in Boston Studios 10 years ago. They're doing a Mickey Mouse game. So there's some different kind of smaller studios doing stuff with Disney now. It's interesting.
You see that? It's already
cool.
out.
I think that's the same game.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Mine's one sentence. I was just going to say, I think that's that same game that in the small worldness of it all is also being scored by David Housden.
That's right. Yeah, me and Dave ran into each other backstage at Disney, and it was like, yes, not bad. Yeah, so David Housden did the Thomas Was Alone music, so it was a nice
That's cool.
We've done all right. The last 10 years have gone well for both of us, right? That's cool.
There's definitely a cool thing about working in the industry for like over 10 years where the people that you knew at the same time that you started out, like the people I knew who were juniors, are now like executives at places. And it's cool to watch, like, I don't know, it's just a rising tide thing. It's cool to watch. I was going to mention the Disney Animal Crossing game that came out this week. Oh, what's it called?
Dreamlight
Valley. It's being like reviewed extremely positively. So it's a 9 out of 10 on Steam. Yeah, but also like people are just loving it to the extent that I, not at all a Disney fan, am like, damn, I might try this out. Like it's like a crossing between The Sims and Animal Crossing, but you just get to have like the Animal Crosses would be just Disney characters. I was like, that's a really good idea.
Basically, yeah, it's like all the different. Yeah, it's a really good idea.
I think it's been out for a week. Yeah, very cool. It looks awesome. I might have to try it out.
I totally missed this announcement. I just pulled up the Steam.
I also missed it until I saw like people buzzing about it.
I think it was announced a while ago. I think it's come out this
came out
week,
a week ago. Yeah. Yeah, and I was like, damn. I was talking to
our mutual friend John Drake is obsessed with it. I was talking to him about it.
Our mutual friend John Drake. I have this like, it's so ridiculous because it's so biased because he's a friend. I love John, but the amount of like dope Disney games that have come out and the way they've changed their presentations since he started working at Disney, I'm like, John, did you do this? Because what the fuck? Like, it's so impressive, and I keep wanting to be like, clearly it's my good friend John Drake.
He got the job and he called people.
It's amazing. No, like it can't just be him, surely. But damn, it's not. It's so
like
cool to watch.
There's amazing. It's amazing. Sorry, there is definitely.
It's actually the only person who works there.
Just John Drake.
It's a remarkably small company.
There's amazingly talented people there, but he definitely, when he joined, like he definitely called up some people, myself included. Like there's definitely like you can see in the things that are happening. Like he went down. No, man, he was like, do you want to do Tron? And it's like,
that's really cool. Like, I mean, what a fun job
he
must
alley
have
behind a bar.
I imagine his job is very stressful, obviously, but like it seems like he just gets to connect cool people. Like that seems awesome. For anyone who doesn't know John Drake, I don't know what his actual job title is, but he was previously at PlayStation for a very long time, which is how probably a lot of us met him in the industry. He's wonderful. I can't find his Twitter for some reason.
So he's been around.
He was all that, like, he was the Guitar Hero era. I can't find his Twitter. It's giving me a bunch of I got John Drake, professor of ecology at the University of Georgia.
That's him.
That's
Moonlight.
also him.
What do you think? Somebody the professor of ecology at University of Georgia, John Drake. I just want to know what he tweets about. Announcing some.
That's going to become a new. Let's make that a new recurring kind of feature of this. Let's just look up a random Twitter account and just sort of learn about someone's life.
Announcing some forthcoming research positions in disease ecology and modeling. He's on brand. Yeah,
professional Twitter account by the sound of it. It's on the up and up.
Iteration of search for 8 faculty and infectious disease dynamics. All right, yeah. New paper testing early warning signs of disease reemergence and elimination using empirically based models. Great. Not toxic at all. Thank you, John Drake.
We may like this John Drake more than our John Drake.
Yeah, there's another John Drake in here.
Neck and neck, right? It's neck and neck.
A lot of good John Drakes out there. There's another one who President Chief Strategy Officer at Drake Cooper. Bits of randomness that I find interesting for one reason or another. Just a lot of sort of AI data. A lot of good John Drakes, turns out. We like them all. All right, good stuff. In any case, when we were talking about choices and how I only become more
Wait,
and more.
pause that really quick, because there was something I wanted to ask that is relevant to something that is about to become irrelevant. So just hold that thought. When you said that the guy, like certain people watched and analyzed every frame, every little like pixel of the trailer. Do either of you know of instances where that, like, a teaser has come out and there's been a thing like that and some hypothesis put forward of a thing that wasn't true, but the people were like, that's a damn good idea. We should think about doing something. Would that even be sort of legally?
Game. Every single game. Someone, maybe not at a massive level, but someone has. Every single game, like someone has put out a trailer for like whatever AAA game, and an audience member has gone, that tree looks crap, or that thing doesn't quite work, or I think that's secretly something else, and people have fixed those things.
That's not what I mean.
But
I mean, it's like,
he means an idea.
Right?
Yeah, if there was like a I'm trying to think of a good hypothetical, but if there was some, implied story beat or a character would be too big. That would be too seismic of a thing. Yeah, but if it was something,
about how expensive is the idea? How expensive is the idea to put in the game?
I have a theory that
there should be like an illusion to something, then that's cool.
Yeah, I have a theory that every video game idea that exists, somebody is already working on somewhere. Because there are so many fucking video games. Like, there are just so many. Like, hundreds every week released on Steam. It might even be thousands at this point. So if the idea exists, somebody's working on it. You just have to try to make sure you beat whoever has a higher budget to it. But I've never heard of that happening, but I don't doubt that it does. Like,
the only thing remotely comparable to this that I could think of is, you remember that game that it's a solo dev who's either in or recently out of university, that's called Sword of Symphony. That's like a very kind of music synced action RPG type game. Mm-hmm. And he's been repeatedly going viral on TikTok because it's exactly the kind of thing that goes well on TikTok. It's immediately visually interesting. It's novel. Every little instance you see of it is clever. It really seems like he's on to something really promising. And the general idea is, it's sort of beat timed move combos that all have sort of musical consequences, and it's very orchestral. So it's like, this attack makes the strings go blah, 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 and that sort of thing. And he's been putting out these TikToks for a good while, and then the new Doctor Strange came out, and there's this big showdown scene where they basically fight exactly visually, if nothing else, like this guy's thing.
Wow.
And a lot of people went and sort of tweeted at him like, I'm pretty sure they stole that from you. And he put out a statement that was like, well, there's no question that I released this well before that movie came out, but there's also, these movies take years, especially MCU movies, where they knew there was going to be a Doctor Strange sequel, during the Neolithic era. Like, this shit's just so predetermined that. But it was one of those where it was quite strikingly, at least on the surface, similar looking. And so it's like, there is this question of like, I wonder if late in the game they thought...
I have a related one. I was once approached, I'm going to be very vague, and I will say this has absolutely nothing to do with any current projects. I was once approached by a company to work with them on something, and I declined it. And then a little while later, the thing came out, and it had a very prominent idea in it that was very similar to something I'd done in the past. And it was very obvious that basically they'd wanted to have me on side so they could do the idea. And when I declined doing the thing, they did it anyway.
How'd you feel about that?
Things of like, I mean, it's not great, but that thing didn't do very well, so it's fine.
Yeah.
There's a composer equivalent to that comes up occasionally. I don't think this has happened to me, although it may have, and I just didn't know about it. But it's very common on certain types of projects to ask several composers to effectively audition for the job. And I've talked to friends who have auditioned, not gotten the gig, and then heard things that are strikingly similar to what was in their audition show up in the final score.
There's a name for that, right? Pitch farming. That's what they call it.
Oh yes,
So
that,
if you've got,
yeah, that
if
I've
you're
heard,
if you
yes.
want to make something of any kind, a game, a movie, whatever, and you don't know what to do, you go to a bunch of clever people and you get them to pitch for it, and then you can just kind of
Yikes,
pick and
that's
choose the bits and
fucking
pieces.
awful.
It's
There are a
less
lot of,
common now than it used to be, but
Oh
I
my
remember it being a real
God.
fear like 10 years ago. Yeah.
I know people
Big,
sometimes
It's
send me
fine.
mail, obviously unsolicited. Please don't do it. Stop doing it. It's not going to work. To Santa Monica Studio because they can find the address, and so they just send mail
Yeah.
there under my name. And
Yeah. I don't
whoever
read any of
runs,
those
I guess,
for that
like
reason, because it
security
can be.
for mail has to try to make sure that whatever I'm being mailed is not a pitch doc. I guess there's some issue with companies receiving pitches because if there's anything that ends up being similar, you basically, like, if it's a pitch doc, you have to not open
Yep.
it.
Yeah.
Because then
That's the best
if there's
advice is,
anything
yeah, if
similar,
you're-
people
yeah.
could claim that it was stolen from their pitch. Yeah, I hope
And
I'm
that's
understanding
happened
that
many
correctly.
times. Like, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's happened many times. And in some cases, you look at the evidence and you go, yeah, this person's pitch was stolen. That's definitely happened. But a lot of the time, yeah, it's just like a vague similarity. But yeah, it's
The shit
yeah,
people send me about God of War.
I too don't read anything anyone sends me. Yeah.
It's really hard to avoid it because sometimes I just get it in YouTube comments and sometimes people are like, and then make this happen and this with this. And I'm like, who? What? Go just write this yourself. It's like a short story. Like, we're not going to do that. Get out. Like, it's very strange. It's a lot of.
As long as it doesn't have
very lengthy shit.
Kratos in it as well, you're legally very safe. It's all out of
true.
copyright. So as long as Kratos
There's
is
a
in
lot
it,
of
fine.
there's definitely a lot of I think instances of people who are convinced that ideas might be stolen in some way, and then when you kind of take a step back and look at it objectively, you go, it's really not as original as you think it is.
Yeah.
I think a lot of these boil down to, you know, like, because what, to your point a second ago, Alanah, seemingly everything is in progress at this moment. And
Schrodinger's video game.
Yeah. What were you going to say, by the way, when I told you hold that thought?
Yeah, I love how you said hold that thought. I just have one quick sentence. And I don't. Why did I believe you?
No, I didn't say one quick sentence. I said I have a question that's about to become
That's what
irrelevant.
episode.
You did. Okay, that's fair. I misinterpreted. What I was going to mention was...
I make no claims of brevity ever.
That's fair. You shouldn't. I would kick you off the podcast for being a goddamn liar.
Yeah, exactly.
I've already done a podcast about it, and I did a stream about it, and I've tweeted about it. I'm effectively shilling. But this game called Wayward Strand just came out today, I think. It's by an Aussie studio called Ghost Pattern. It's a really small team, and it is...
An Aussie studio.
Yes.
No integrity.
That's like
Wayward
anytime I see a
Strand.
cool Australian game featured in a conference, I basically immediately message them and I'm like, hey, how can I help promote this? I'm actually legally an Australian
Corruption
ambassador for
of the
video
highest
games.
order.
I know, it's very
that right?
it's very corrupt. No, the Australian
By order
government
of-
asked me to be an ambassador for video games for the state. So I like actually formally have that title, Australian ambassador for video games. But I do
For
it
the state, meaning like your Queensland's specific?
I think it's
like,
technically
No,
well,
California.
by for the state
California
I mean the
specific.
state as an entity, not a
okay.
specific state.
I just love the idea that there's a different, like, Victoria.
The Victorian government is the one that gives
Ambassador
out all the
and-
grants, so I wouldn't be surprised. And this is a Victorian studio; they mostly are Victorian.
Yep.
You have half brick. Well, yeah, you know the Australian dev scene at this point.
I was just there,
You were.
relishing in the coffee.
Oh God, I miss it so much. And every time I go back, and everywhere has good coffee. Here, it's like 1% of places. Australia, it's like 99.
all
Starbucks
of
is the
them.
bad coffee in Australia. It kills me.
I had 26 coffees while I was there. I kept like a photo journal that I was bombarding my friends with.
And I bet
because
they were
was
all
like,
good.
Oh, they were all amazing. They were like literally all, even the bad ones were
It
amazing.
hurts. It's so good. I don't know what's wrong with this stupid country. Anyway, Wayward Strand is a game that, again, I saw it was Australian in a conference, reached out to them, and I was also just really interested in it as a concept because it does a lot of things that I think a lot of game studios wish they could do but don't often do or can't often take the risk on, which is that it is effectively a Sleep No More type. It is very much a play, and one of the writers has actually no video game experience and entirely theater experience, and the other one has come through a programming background and has writing experience. So I think the writing stuff might have expanded beyond those two, but those were the two writers I spoke to. And it's basically you're on an airship that is almost like a dollhouse in presentation. There are patients as it is technically a hospital wing for the elderly. And everything that happens regardless of where you are or what you're doing. So if you want to go visit one of these patients, it could be at the time that one of the nurses is there, so the interaction will be different, but there's nothing to ever draw you there. You can really walk wherever you want at any point in time and talk to anyone and really do anything. Again, in a way that my first playthrough and my second playthrough were completely different. Not completely different in an epic AAA sense of, oh, the outcome, this person died, the twists and turns. It's not morality. It's a much more like observational narrative experience where you are walking through and talking to these people. You can follow certain threads. You heard that one of the staff quit. Do you want to ask people about why she quit and dig into that? Like, I had inferred that she had a relationship with another nurse and that ended and that's why she quit. But you could also follow questions about why does one of the patients have a bunch of trophies in her room, and ask people if they know about her history. And again, you would just walk wherever you want to at any point in time. People may not be in the room. They might be in the room. They might be in the middle of eating. They might kick you out. They could be in a good mood. They could be in a bad mood in a completely non-linear way. Again, in a way that I don't know if I can think of any other games that have done that quite to that extent. And it's...
What's the train one I'm thinking of, Austin? What's the train one from...
Subsurface Circular.
The 90s. No, the good one. The good one. The good one.
Train?
There was one where you would walk around on a train as a detective, and it was like this running in real time. I cannot think what it was called.
So Wayward Strand also runs.
It had like it was rotoscoped actors. I'm going to find this.
I don't know what you're talking
again.
about.
The comments are lighting up.
In any case, I want to recommend it.
The only 90s rotoscope train.
The Last Express. The Last Express.
I haven't even heard of that.
I was going to say Flashback, which is an action game, not at all what we're talking about.
No.
Go ahead.
Yeah, The Last Express was definitely like a similar idea, but you're right, Alanah. It's the kind of game that every game writer wants to do, but it's a very bold play, so fair play to them.
They worked on it for 7 years.
Amazing.
I really do recommend
incredible.
it. And it's not like a video game that necessarily everyone's going to like. It doesn't have guns and action. It is you talking to a bunch of elderly people. But I found it to be a really introspective experience because it's such a cool thing that video games can do, and that plays like Sleep No More can do, where it makes you assess why you've made the choices that you've made. Like, why did I choose to talk to this person? How interested am I actually in anything they're saying? And I think especially when most of the characters are sick elderly people, like some of whom, their friend died one day before and you have to move all his stuff out. It just really like made me think about, the conversations that I have with my grandma and how I sometimes treat it like it's a chore because she asks me the same questions 5 times because she doesn't remember. And then I never ask her any questions about her childhood or her life. And I've never really had a game challenge me in that kind of introspective way. So I really, really, really appreciate it. It's like very small indie game, small studio. You're not going to see it marketed very much. So I'm talking about it repeatedly. It's just a really unique experience. And again, the kind of thing that I feel like so many people wish they could write, but it's such a risk because you're making a bunch of shit that nobody's going to see in a lot of cases. So yeah, definitely recommend it.
Boy, do I understand... As someone who is
author
of a musical that has that exact situation. No, I love this kind of thing. The only thing that I can think of, even remotely like this, which is not the same, but the Sleep No More, like that, with that as the connective thread, one of the coolest deliveries of narrative that I remember in recent years was Fulbright's second game, Tacoma.
Good example.
Yeah, that was great.
Where it had that theater-like voyeuristic quality where you would replay the conversations and you could I remember thinking, this is the kind of thing that you could never do as a theater experience, even though it feels so much like a theater experience where you're like in a room and 2 people come walking in mid-conversation and you can rewind the scene and like backtrack to where they are and follow along that whole thing that they were saying before they entered the room. Because when you initially saw them, they were like, oh, shh, and they like hushed themselves when they entered the room and saw other people. And I was like, this is an unbelievably cool way to piece together a story. It's almost like...
Tacoma's still pretty objective based, though. Like, you do have to find the correct tidbit of information to continue.
It is only in when you mentioned Sleep No More, it gave me that sense of like, if I go around a corner and I look at this thing, I'll see something different than if I hadn't, which is, of course, the whole premise of Sleep No More. I think it's such an undercooked, underdeveloped, underexplored narrative sort of mechanic. If it's,
I think it is because of the cost.
Like
it's because it's really hard to justify
It's
something that a
really
lot of
hard.
players won't even see.
I'd say weirdly, I think the closest to a big budget version of that we've ever seen is the Hitman games, right? They have that similar.
That's true.
Especially certain levels in Hitman games, like that similar kind of theatrical. It's just kind of happening around you.
And
thing.
it is a bit more
It's
approachable because they're
nightmare.
not narrative driven.
Yeah, and to be clear, I actually have a little experience of how tough this is, because that's how Subsurface Circular started. Subsurface Circular originally, the idea was that it was a train that was going around and characters were kind of getting on and off on their own schedules, and you were kind of interacting with them and figuring it out. And in the act of making that, you realize just how really fucking hard it is. It was originally, Subsurface Circular was originally going to be kind of my ode to like games like The Last Express. And then, yeah, in the act of actually putting it together, you go, actually, it would be much better if the characters got on and off the train at the times that made sense for the story, and you just kind of find yourself falling into the the more comfortable kind of linear storytelling thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have a lot of respect for people who stick to their guns and go for them.
Yeah. Not having the control is such a stressor, and I feel like makes QA very difficult.
Oh my god.
Pushing Austin's current trouble buttons right here.
Well, it's because it's effectively. I mean, I'll tell you, our programmer on Stray Gods did the math on the number of different permutations that are substantively different, and it was millions.
Austin, I'm so excited about it. I'm so excited.
Presumably, they're doing automated testing, though. I would assume, right?
Well,
they're not
you can
QAing every one of those paths.
You can automate testing that the logic is coherent, but someone has to also make sure it sounds good because it's a musical.
No, I think computers can do that now. I've seen some. AIs can draw now, Austin. I'm sure they can do some music. That's fine. It's the same thing. Right?
It is an interesting. It is an interesting challenge. We've not done that
debate on the show, right? We've not done the AI
Mid-Journey debates.
The Mid-Journey.
We haven't spoken about how we feel about it ethically, but we have referred to previously Zoom as our AI extra member of the podcast who highlights who is speaking and when.
That's true.
And mutes out shitty background noises. We have done that. We appreciate you, AI.
I like how that's basically in the same breath as Mid-Journey.
I don't know how I feel about that stuff. I don't know how I feel about it. I have not come to a conclusion yet. I'm unclear. I'm figuring it out.
As with all AI, it's a very clever trick.
Yes,
it's essentially mixing up. It doesn't have an intentionality. Therefore, to me, it can't produce art. That's my kind of definition. It's mashing up stuff in the randomized pursuit of something rather than
So here's where my sympathies with the more kind of avant-garde camp about art sort of activates, where there are so many imagine there's a garbage truck going down the road and some garbage falls off, and it falls off in front of a very on the side of the road in front of a super picturesque beautiful forest. Yeah. And it was 100% an accident of physics. Someone comes along and they simply take a photo of that juxtaposition.
They have intent.
They have intent, but they are documenting. They saw that
and they were like, "Oh, that's funny. That's interesting because there's a juxtaposition there." And they took a photo. But
the people who are
giving the prompts to the AI,
they're giving the prompts, and they're also choosing of the outputs what they want.
I agree.
So
when they're giving it a brief, they're saying a thing on a hill. They're not saying I want to make something that speaks to the juxtaposition between. You won't get good results because the AI won't understand what the juxtaposition between the wealthy and the poor is. They'll understand.
On a philosophical level, though, I don't know that I see much distinction because so much of art is in the recipient. I mean, there was a famous example a few years ago where...
But an artist understands what they're doing. An artist is aware and conscious of their act, even if they're doing it in a chaotic or messy way.
As reductive as it is, I don't see how the person who is writing the text into the AI machine is not the artist. They're not painting.
Because they didn't know what they were producing. is that if I go up to
Are they not though? It's a prompt, and they're just using a tool.
so if I go if I go up to Damien Hirst and go, I think you should draw a picture of a cow. Like, am I the artist who made that picture?
No.
No, but I don't think we would argue that he is your tool. Whereas
by definition, then this is actually.
Was there an era where people thought that using Photoshop made you not an artist?
There's still painters that would say that. There's still hardcore like oil paint. This is a thing Alanah has dealt with.
People were wrong in the past is a bad argument for why people are right in the future. But it is.
It is, but I don't think that's fair to dismiss this particular thing that way. Photoshop's a tool.
Photoshop's a tool, but it's a tool which allows an author to express intent. And by definition, none of the AI tools currently allow you to express a creative intent and have it manifest. Someone using Photoshop doesn't make the art for you. It is literally a paintbrush. These are not paintbrushes, these AIs. These AIs are going off and they're randomly mushing together. Essentially, it's Google image search, but it kind of combines the images at the end. There's no artistry or intentionality.
It doesn't seem like it's random, though.
By definition, it is. It's random.
But if it's responding to your prompt, how is that random? It is immediately filtering out of the infinite things it could choose. It's eliminating.
Yeah, it's like Google image search. So Google image search, you put in keywords, it finds images that match what you said. Essentially the way most of these AI artists work is. It finds a bunch of images based on your keywords, and then it's a complicated process, but essentially you have like an AI that's randomly generating imagery, and the imagery that looks most like some of those key pieces gets chosen, and you iterate through that a few million times.
I would agree that it's random.
It's not making a choice about what it's going to draw. It doesn't know fundamentally, the AI doesn't know what a cat is.
I just can think of so many instances. Yeah, and I get that. And to be clear, I'm just pushing up against it as a thought experiment here.
Because I think I also agree. I think that art requires expression of imagination. And I don't think AI can do that. But it is interesting to say, how is the person offering the prompts not just an artist using a very quick tool? Because they have intent of expressing imagination.
The best AI art that I've seen has been stuff where an actual, an artist has used it to generate some texture or like a bit of something that can then, like, you see people who like give it some keywords, it spits out something, and then they'll go over and they'll refine. So it's kind of like, putting an ink blot on a piece of paper and then trying to like draw that into an animal. It's a nice way of roughing up the page. I've seen that work really well, but then obviously all the stuff that makes that special and good is the human at the end of it. The interesting thing here as well, which I just want to touch on as someone who has to make art and has to hire people to make art as well as making art myself, is AI legally is a mess right now.
That's what I mean. I don't know how I feel about it ethically. I'm not sure yet.
But legally it's a nightmare. So AI, because these AIs aren't actually people cannot, in order for IP to be owned, it has to be made by a person. No one, the
AI, the creator of the AI?
Well, no, because the AI, and this is what I'm saying about the image mashup, is there are artists now who are looking at these AI images that are being generated and going, that's the face from a character in one of my drawings. It's because this thing is not coming up with this stuff. It's just recombining images it's finding online. So there's already artists who are like, and so I don't think it's been taken to court yet, but essentially this is plagiarism. It's very messy, interestingly integrated plagiarism, but this stuff can't be used. It has to, by definition,
be mass plagiarism because it isn't capable of creating anything. It is only capable of stealing.
It doesn't know what a cat is.
It doesn't know what a cat is.
It needs to find pictures of cats. It's not an artist. It's not done with it. It's not aware.
If I were to really just give up on titling this podcast, I would name this episode "It Doesn't Know What a Cat Is." But I should go with
this
Tron.
Podcast, Alanah, is Wishlist Tron Identity. That's
to me that exposes that copyright laws and the nature of image recognition and all that, is basically going to have to undergo some serious revision in order to keep up with where that technology, because that's a very interesting, I hadn't thought about the idea that
all tech companies could stop stealing the art of artists. That would be the other.
But the thing is, the genie's out of the bottle. There's no reversing course on the idea of this sort of technology. So the question is, how do you do it? This would be the equivalent of I
tell you what, the tech companies have to hire artists to draw cats. That's the problem, is if you think about where else other than the tech sector could you basically go and copy without permission millions of pieces of pre-owned copyrighted works and then make that your business. I can't go
the only thing that I can think of,
sell a package of 100 Nintendo games for 10 quid.
Here is
Nintendo would sue me,
Here is the comparison that I can think of. It's not a great one, but it sort of works. 110 odd years ago, the composers of Tin Pan Alley, the Gershwin era type folks who were writing a lot of the hit songs of the day, would earn their living by selling sheet music of their songs. And the phenomenon started to occur where a singer would buy their sheet music and then go sell out a theater performing this person's music. And the composers started to realize, this person's earning more than I am by playing my music.
Yeah.
So they created what are referred to as performance royalty organizations, which were then, it led to legislation that governs how these rates are determined. And there's a whole thing in the US, at least, it's called rate courts, which sort of try to determine what the rates ought to be. But basically it says, if you engage in public exhibition of this material, then the exhibitor, which in this case would be the theaters, not the performers, the theater who is making an agreement with the performer, has to pay an annual license fee, and all the music that is performed is paid out of that annual license fee. In the US, the three companies are called ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC. In the UK, yours is called PRS. It's APRA in Australia. Every country in the world has their own local performance royalty organization that monitors TV, radio, movie theaters, all that kind of stuff, where music, and of course live, even like restaurants, anywhere that music is being publicly exhibited, theoretically the composers and publishers of that music will be able to earn a royalty. So it was one of those where they realized it's not like we want to stop people from performing our music. We want a way to be able to kind of get in on it. And they found a way that doesn't impede, it doesn't slow the artists and the singers out there ability to earn a living doing it. It's not a perfect analogy, but the idea of, rather than say we should set it up where you have to ask permission every single time and I need to gatekeep it. It's it's impossible. You're past that point. So the question is, how do we carve out something that says, if AI can generate it, then maybe AI can track it, and that you could create the equivalent of metadata that follows it along and
bibliography.
And
I think you just invent NFTs, Austin.
Yeah, well, maybe.
The blockchain.
I'm obviously no expert, and I'm just spouting off the top of my head here, but the idea of you cannot reverse course on this stuff. This stuff's been inevitable for years.
But the challenge with what you're saying, and you're right, that would be a wonderful approach. The problem is, because the AI layer exists, and the AI layer, in my opinion, is there to obfuscate the fact that it's a plagiaristic process. If I make a picture of it, let's stick to cats. If I make a picture of a cat using an AI, it's literally used millions of pictures of cats to create that picture of a cat. So however much I sell that cat for, the actual return with the music thing, it works because if I'm doing a concert, at most I'm singing 10 songs by 10 people, right? Or 20 songs by 20 people, or whatever. It's a very,
and you would name the songs and all that.
Exactly.
I totally get why it's an imperfect analogy.
Oh no, and I'm not shitting on it. It's just trying to work out how to do that with this, and also crucially as well with tech companies, they don't want to pay for the stuff that they've already nicked, and you see that time and again with tech companies who've kind of grabbed assets, and this has happened with almost every industry out there. They don't want to then pay for those assets, so it'll be a tricky one to litigate.
I don't know
sorry, go on.
I was just saying, I don't know the solution. I think you definitely are highlighting an earnest problem with it. I do bristle at the rejection of it being at least some form of art, if you were to couch it and say it's a lesser form of art, in the way that if there was like a separate Olympics where they're allowed to dope the shit out of themselves, that like would be a less impressive Olympics.
I would watch the hell out of that, by the way. Like
it would be like the Cyborg Olympics, like sign me up. But I think, because I just always go back to the classic.
I do think it can be incorporated into art, to be clear. I don't think it in itself is art, but I do think it's a tool that could be, and I've seen it used by artists really well, and it is inspiring when you see that. It's like kit bashing or photo montage. Like there's a place for it, for sure.
Do you consider, do you know Fountain of Marcel Duchamp? The sort of like the urinal that was just placed in an art gallery.
Yeah.
You guys, I put a cat using AI into one of these, and it's so bad. I don't think we need to worry about this. Let me know if that works, because it's bad.
I think the title of the episode is going to be Tron, but the thumbnail is going to be this.
That was my plan. I was going to make a cyberpunk cat using AI, but they're so bad that you can't even tell what it is.
I definitely don't see the using AI part of this, but I like the weird-eyed cat.
I think if you typed in Tron cat, you'd probably get something.
Okay.
My point being that the Duchamp example was that like that to many people was most certainly not art, because all he did was take something someone else made and shift its location. And then over time, the general consensus has become that shifting of location is the artist's intent. That is enough to qualify it as art. And I look at that and I go, look, it's not the kind of art I'm interested in making, conceptually speaking. But I understand the perspective, and I think it's thought provoking, and I like discussions that chase down that rabbit hole. And I really don't see what the big distinction is between something like that and using a tool to make, cyberpunk cats or whatever the newest.
I think if we're doing, I'm just going to look at the image Alanah shared. Nice.
That's Tron cat.
That's amazing. I think if we're doing
there's no cat whatsoever
in that at all.
If we're doing analogies to art history, I think that actually a better potential kind of point would be Roy Lichtenstein. Would be like, because basically Roy Lichtenstein, it's the guy who did like comic book panels as like acrylic big paintings, like there's the classic one of like a woman on the phone asking for help or something, like, what I'm talking about. who triggered an interesting debate, because obviously that artist had taken it and done it in acrylics and done it beautifully and was selling these for, I think hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, but they were all basically blown up versions of actual comic book frames. That was taking someone's art that already existed and recontextualizing it. And your comic book artist is making cents per page, right? In that day and age. And then the artist is obviously getting a phenomenal amount.
That's an interesting. I can see why you think that's a closer comparison, because it's.
I don't know what the right answer is there, because there's definitely there's definitely the part of me that's like, no, that's plagiarism, and that artist doesn't deserve the money. But also they changed it, they adjusted it, they rebuilt it.
The amount of things that, as a writer, that you were like, ooh, I like that thing about that character, what about that? And then you mash them together. Is that not the same kind of plagiarism? Even if they're not copied, you've taken a million ideas and you put them together.
Which arguably all art is, no matter what.
But you've done it with an intention, and you've done it using you're creating interesting juxtapositions. When I'm watching DS9 and they start and literally Quark says war, what is it good for? In my opinion, absolutely nothing, as a line in that show, because the DS9 writers were obsessed with putting in Easter eggs and lines from other things in their show. Like, that's witty and funny and interesting and done with intent. Like, so for me, that makes it better. But then is that just the arrogance of a human assuming that an AI couldn't come up with a good joke? Like, I like I said, I definitely have opinions on this stuff, but I think like Austin, it's definitely too early for me to absolutely pin my opinion to a wall and say that's the right answer, because I think
I also just have this really strong knee-jerk reaction to avoid anything that feels like gatekeeping and say, because I always just think back to like, remember when we were working on it was either on Journey or when TGC was on Flower, and Kelly Santiago, the producer at that game company, got into a Twitter spat with Roger Ebert that became the like hallmark of all these kinds of discussions where are games art? And I gave a number of public talks at universities and stuff around that time where I basically, my sort of summary statement was, let's just argue that whatever the great works of art, whatever benchmark, like, the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, or take your pick of like seminal work created by humanity in its entire history. Let's say that games have never come even close to that level of art. Let's just accept, for argument's sake, that no game is even approaching that level of art, however one would quantify it. Why are we now in a position to declare they also never will?
Yeah.
And that's the part of me that just goes,
that's what it is.
Yeah, like I look at new technologies and think, I don't know that Midjourney qualifies as great art, nor do I know if the person inputting the prompt is an artist, but I'm very hesitant to make a declaration that something behind that door could never be art.
And I'm definitely not saying that. The just to bring it full circle.
And it's clear you're not.
Famously, Tron was refused any special effects Oscars or awards because it was assumed at the time that the computer did the entire thing, and that they were inventing literally like innovative, amazing new technologies that will redefine the next 40 years of cinema. But they themselves couldn't win an Oscar because it was just assumed the computer did it. So
look,
I take your point here for sure. Like, and no one wants to be on the wrong side of those examples, right? No one wants to be the guy who argued that Tron wasn't an important movie in the history of special effects. You don't be that person.
Just stop the episode now because you brought it home so elegantly that we're never gonna. I would go. Yeah, go for it. It's not on me. I'm just saying, like, I'm done. That was the most perfect, like, segue back to home, and the episode's done.
Alanah's already done the cut. None of this is in the episode.
All right.
Exactly.
Well, we'll see you all next week.
Yes.
Oh.